Okay, hi Miss Yates. I'm Kira Leach, and this is my Learning Disabilities Screencast number 2. So, communicating with parents prior to the SST, which is the Student Study Team meeting. It is important to identify the child as needing the special help that they might require, and then immediately schedule a meeting or a conference with the parents as soon as possible. Now, during this meeting or even during the phone call as a teacher or anybody else on the team, you want to use statements like, I have observed that your insert student has been ... Use confident and nice language when talking to the parent. The parent preparation sheet. This is something that is given to the parent even prior to the SST meeting. It could even be given to them at it. The parent fills it out completely. They fill out the sheet at the meeting if necessary, but filling it out prior will allow them to be more involved in the actions of the meeting and be more part of the SST. The feelings and reactions when it comes to having a student with an SST, the reactions and feelings of the student's parents will never be the same from student to student. It will vary in intensity and duration, along with the possibility that their initial reactions may not be voiced. Things like shock and denial can occur, and then anger, then guilt, blaming, resignation, depression, and then finally acceptance. So the SST process, there are multiple steps to this student study team process. The first one is gathering the student's data. They want to plan strategies to assist the student within the resources of the general education program, then monitor the student's progress, build trust between parent and school, and then finally make referrals for formal evaluation when it's needed. SST, or the student study team sample summary sheet, that's a picture of it right there, kind of blurry, but it has things like the student's strengths. What are they good at? What do they know? Some concerns that we might have, questions that we have, ideas that we can give to aid them, the responsibility of the parent or the responsibility of the teacher, and then the top portion is the student's information, like their name, their teacher, where they're from, things like that. Accommodations and their roles. So in the SST meeting, there's a list of many different accommodations that are brought to the attention of the student. There are many to consider in the sense of the student may later need them when they're in the classroom. Some of those are a change in the student's seating, limit the number of directions they are given, provide their student with a quieter environment when it comes to testing, things like that. Digital accommodations. Well, we're in the 20th century, so there's no escaping technology, unfortunately. It's in all of the classrooms that you go to these days, even in the lower levels. There are many different technological things that can benefit students. There are things like computer games that help students practice basic skills. There, you can give a student a laptop, they could type up their notes, they could record lectures, things like that. There are things called sensory accommodations, and those are for the students with sensory issues that make their functioning in the classroom difficult. There are many different types of seats, sensory feedback mats, manipulatives, headphones, and types of clothing that are designed to help manage sensory information sent to the brain. That's directly from our book. It is important, though, that the students who might have those issues check with a physical therapist or occupational therapist. That's the teacher and the parent's job. So that's the end of part 1. The second part begins with least restrictive environment, or LRE. The purpose of this is to assure that all handicapped children have available to them a free and appropriate education. It emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs. So each handicapped child ages 3 to 21 will receive this. Directly from our book, it says this law services are available to individuals who are learning disabled, mentally retarded, handicapped, hearing disabled, speech and language disabled, visually disabled, and so on. So, parent right and the law. Along with this law, there are many different things that parents have the right to. Along with those rights, it is a legal requirement that they are given a copy of those rights. There are many rights, and those are just 5 of the many rights that parents have. So, Ronker versus Walter. There are many different court decisions that were applied to Michigan that had some input when it came to disabilities in the LRE, and in this case, the school was required to serve a child with a disability in a non-segregated setting with necessary supports could be provided to make that the setting was appropriate for them. This was just one of the many. There were many changes to the IDEA regulations. Those changes made it clear that the students with disabilities cannot be removed from general education simply because they need modifications to the general curriculum. A big thing is, how are you helping a student with a learning disability learn if you're taking them away from the initial teaching of a lesson? There needs to be some sort of compromise so that that doesn't happen and there isn't a lag in that lesson. The Universal Dedication Vision Statement. So the Michigan State Board of Education adopted its own Universal Dedication Vision Statement in October of 2005, and it includes that they will honor the rights of students to learn together. So there are many provisions in the IDEA that had an impact on the LRE, or the least restrictive environment. Those include the 20 and all of the weird number combination type deals. In that first one, the schools are required to employ only highly qualified special education teachers. They must have several qualifications related to providing specialized instruction, which you would hope is common sense. And then the second one is they're required to offer all students access to general curriculum according to standards set by the state. So this is saying that even just because a student has a learning disability, that doesn't mean they shouldn't be told the standards and the things they are supposed to be learned. They are supposed to learn in spite if they're not at grade level appropriateness. So the LRE and the Section 504, I just took a quote immediately from the book because it mandates in education in the least restrictive environment and states that if students are placed away from a regular school, the facilities, equipment, and programs available in that placement must be comparable to those available in the regular school. And that is the end of part 2. So part 3, it starts off with the multidisciplinary team process, and this team meets prior to the SST, and then it is concluded that the student is in need of further help with their education, much further than the SST would be able to provide. This group of people is similar to the SST. They're a group of professionals, and they are there to gather information on the student that will allow them to discover what that student needs to meet their educational requirements. There are many things that the multidisciplinary team goes through. They are given referrals for formal assessment and things like that. So this is a case in reference of how there are some controversies that arose from IQ tests, and those were that they were racially and culturally discriminatory. The court ruled that the intellectual functioning of a black child must be gauged by his adaptive behaviors, personal history and development, classroom performance, and academic achievement, not by IQ tests. But these days, the intelligent quotient test should be free of those cultural biases. Some common IQ tests that you might hear are I'm going to butcher these, the Wechsler Intelligence Scales for Children, Stanford Binet Intelligence Scale, the Kaufman Assessment Battery for Children, the Slauson Intelligence Test Revised, the Test for Nonverbal Intelligence. The Wechsler Scales of intelligence are the most widely used individualized measures, so the most commonly used IQ tests. There are 3 different tests in those series that range from the years 4 to 6, and then 6 to 16, and then 16 and up. And then for just commonly used tests, when it comes to assessment in a school, there are the tests, the Bergantz Diagnostic Inventory of Basic Skills, which is appropriate for children K through 9. It tests their readiness in reading, language arts, and mathematics. We actually gave this test to Mrs. Yates' 7th grade class last year. Then there is the Wechsler Individual Achievement Test. It is a norm reference test for ages 5 to 19. It's there to decode and read for reading comprehension, spelling. And then there is the Kaufman test, which is also a norm referenced standardized test that measures decoding skills as well in reading comprehension, spelling, and math. It's for K through 12. Observation. So what is the purpose of observation? Observation is there. It's done by special education specialists. It could be as short as 10 minutes. It could be in multiple class periods. It's there to measure a student's performance. And a student's performance measures differently day to day, and it also is dependent on the time of day. Observation write-ups, they're there to tell what the lesson was, to tell what a student's responsibility was, things that the teacher might ask a student. They might want to make sure that the student is on task, things like that. So we're supposed to use a sheet that we were given in class, and unfortunately I can't find mine. So my guess of the patterns of strengths and weaknesses is referring to different portions of education that a child is good at and then a child is bad at. Those typically might be opposites of each other because strength and weakness is opposite of each other, so I'm assuming that also means it could mean in one portion of their reading, one portion of their math, they have some strengths, some weaknesses, like things like that. So the discrepancy model, it is a model that can be used to award services for students with learning disabilities. This method is no longer the only thing used to define if a student is in need of those services because it doesn't completely measure a student's progress. The end.